Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to episode 112 of the BJJ Brick Podcast. My name is Byron, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Straight Blast Gym coach Mark Fisher. Mark is our response to an interview we had a few weeks ago with Kurt Osiander. If you hadn't heard that one, you might want to go check it out. It kind of helped get this episode rolling, I think. And I'll get to that more in a little bit. He's a brown belt at Straight Blast Gym in Portland, and he has started a community on Facebook called Roll Out. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. First off, you might notice that I'm flying solo today. No Gary is with me, so a little bit disappointed in that. Actually, Gary and I recorded our introduction and the exit segment last night, and it was very distorted and full of static, and so it's pretty much unusable, and I still want to get this episode out Monday. I think this is a very important episode for the Jiu-Jitsu community. I don't think there's been a show quite like this on any, maybe there has, but or any podcast or anything really to get this information out. So I think this is very important, and I don't want to delay it a day or two or anything like that. So I'm going to fly solo, and next week we'll have the better looking host back on the show and making his jokes and giving us his insight like usual. So we appreciate it. Next week we'll have Gary back. So if you haven't heard the interview with Kurt Osiander, you might go give it a listen. You don't have to. Mark is a funny guy, and he makes several jokes that you're not really going to get unless you've heard that interview. But, take it or leave it. You might just hear me laughing for basically no reason or not understand why. You're basically just going to be missing an inside joke about that interview. During Kurt's interview, he does use some pretty harsh language towards people of different sexual orientations. And at the end of that interview, Gary and I came on and we talked about our own opinions and how we felt and how that we weren't really comfortable even airing the interview unless we talked about it afterwards. So we did that, and we also said, hey, I don't really see much of a community of jiu-jitsu people that support people of different sexual orientations, and we'd like to hear from somebody if they have a community and get that out to people. And so for too long, we got an email from Mark Fisher, and he's got Roll Out Jiu-Jitsu. You can go to facebook.com/rollout jiu-jitsu, and if you can't find it, I'll put a link to it in the show notes, of course. This is an important community if you're looking for a little support. Also, I don't really belong to this communities. I belong to the jiu-jitsu community, but I don't really fit the category of people that they're trying to help out. I'm a straight male who likes jiu-jitsu. I mean, I'm a little undereducated in this area of life that some people have. So Mark, some of this interview, you're going to hear me kind of learn about things and learn about that culture. And I went by and liked the Facebook page, and this does a couple things. It probably the biggest thing is if I have a teammate that wants to possibly come out, they could go to the Facebook page there and see that I already like the page, and that will let them know that, hey, at least if I tell Byron, he's not going to freak out and nothing about my training is going to change, and he's it's going to be okay. And that Mark shares his story about how it was kind of difficult for him to do that, and it was stressful. He didn't know how people would react. So just by going there and liking the page, it's at least showing some support of your teammates, because if you think about it, I know I've rolled with over 100 people this year. I don't know how many people I've rolled with, but I know it's got to be over 100. And none of them have told me or have, not necessarily told me, but I don't know that any of them are of a different sexual orientation than myself. And some of them probably are. If you roll with that many people, absolutely, they're just either our sport or our martial art is so negative towards that lifestyle that they don't show up, or they're just not telling us. And I would like to believe that they're just not telling us, because I can't believe that jiu-jitsu it's so positive for my life and everybody who I know who gets so much out of it. Why would we want to limit people from training just because of their orientation? So that's no reason that that I would want to believe that the people aren't training with us. They just aren't comfortable telling us who they are. And so, by liking that page and showing some support, hopefully it makes it a little easier for people who want to be out to tell some people. So that's why I went by there and liked it, and I like to show them some support. I urge you to do the same. Even, definitely if you're in a gym and you're considering coming out to people, go by there and get some support. Mark's a super nice guy. And so are the people who run the page, and they will be glad to give you advice and help you out, and it should make that process a little easier for you. And also, I've got a Straight Blast Gym coach on the line, going to ask lots of questions about coaching and getting better and things like that, because they're always great to hear from. Speaking of Straight Blast Gym, we had Matt Thornton here in Wichita, Kansas, earlier this week. He did a talk on violence and martial arts and kind of some delusions that people have. And it was very fascinating talk. And he's actually working on a book. I don't know for sure when it's coming out. I think he said he hopes it's going to be next year. But definitely interested in that. Definitely get him back on the podcast when that comes out, or when it's coming close to come out. But he's got some really fascinating ideas about self-defense and in martial arts and just a lot of realities you don't think about that we get to train, and we kind of, I train for fun. I don't really worry about getting in a fight all the time, but it's definitely a benefit being able to defend yourself as training jiu-jitsu. If you are new to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or you're within your first year, which is fairly new to Jiu-Jitsu, I urge you to go by our website here or in the show notes on bjjbrick.com. And we have an audiobook for sale. It's $11.99. It's your first year of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's going to help you find everything. It's going to help you find your gym. It's going to help you understand some basic techniques and some ideas. It's going to help you understand the culture of Jiu-Jitsu, and so you're not making people upset and breaking some social norms that you don't even realize exist, So it's a great book to help you through your first year of training. If you can get through that first year successfully and still enjoy it and not feel like you're forcing yourself to go, you're going to be doing jiu-jitsu for a long time. That's a great thing. It's a great way to stay in shape. It's a great way to make new friends and meet new people and learn about how your body works, on and off the mat. There's so many benefits to jiu-jitsu. So if you're early on in training, especially if you're dealing with any frustrations, the book is designed to help you out. If you're frustrated with jiu-jitsu and you're considering quitting, send us an email, bjjbrick@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to try to pat you on the back and keep you motivated a little bit longer. We all have those little hurdles in jiu-jitsu, but getting those hurdles at the beginning sometimes ends your mat time early. And, if you've been in it for a couple of years, you get a couple of hurdles, you stick with it. It's not that big a deal. That's part of life. But early on, you get those hurdles, and we don't want it to dissuade anybody from training. But just the audiobook is a great way to help support the podcast, keep us going, help keep the show paid for, and it's our way to try to help you guys out in your first year of training. We also have an email list, so if you want to get the show notes emailed to you every week, the email list is the way to go. Go to the website or our Facebook page and put your name and email address in there, and every Tuesday we'll send you out the show notes and tell you what's up on the show, and a lot of links to all the sites that we reference and articles and quotes and stuff like that. It's all there for you, nice and easy in your email every week. All right, let's do our quote of the week here. It's always strange doing the introduction and exit without Gary. He's so much fun to throw ideas off of and just joke around with. But like I said, next week we'll have him back and definitely enjoy getting things back to normal. But a quote of the week, I don't actually have an author for this one. I saw it on, I think it was on Instagram. It says, set a goal so big that you can't achieve it until you grow into the person who can. And I like this quote. I read this one to my wife this morning, and she said that it's kind of a dumb quote, like you set goals that you're not going to be able to reach. I don't see it that way. If I set a goal to be a billionaire, I'm probably going to fail at that. That's not something that I'm going to be accomplishing with the type of life that I've given myself and created. So, that's a goal that would end in failure. And that's kind of what her idea was, I think. Give yourself a goal that you aren't going to be able to reach. That's one way to look at that. But I look at it like you're setting a goal that you can't achieve today, but there's some hard work and some dedication. You're going to change who you are, and you'll be able to achieve it later. You know, if you have a goal and you're a white belt, you have a goal to be a blue belt. Well, you literally have to change things about yourself to become that blue belt. I mean, you can't not make any changes to your training, make any changes to the techniques you know, and become a blue belt just by happenstance. Like, you have to make some changes. If you want to do a tournament in two months, and you're going to part of that tournament, you're going to be training for and getting ready and honing your techniques. You're going to do better after the end of that 2 weeks of training than you did if you just done that tournament like the day you signed up for it and didn't train at all for it. So, you know, just making small changes. I mean, these goals don't need to be massive to where, you know, you're the white belt saying, I'm going to be a black belt in a few years. That's not really a good goal. I mean, it's clearly you want to get better at jiu-jitsu in those years, but just the goal for the belt is kind of sometimes a ridiculous goal for somebody who's a white belt. You know, focus on adding your techniques and getting better. And then, you know, after you start doing that, then you can start looking at blue belt. Like, that's a goal that's achievable within a couple of years with some hard work. So I think my wife had some ideas about setting realistic goals, and I like this because it's setting goals that push you. So I offered to hey, you want to come in here and talk with me about this? But she declined. She's a little shy, I think so. And without Gary, Gary had some good points. We did talk about this last night, and he had some good points about it, but they're not popping in my head, and I can't present them the way Gary would. So I don't want to do him any disservice. Well, I got to move right along to the article of the week. Excellent blog here, bjj-australia.blogspot.com. That's John Will's blog. He writes a ton of stuff on here. It's amazing how many blog posts he puts on. This one's titled Fool's Gold. And that immediately caught my eye. I want to see what he wants to talk about when he titles something Fool's Gold. He's talking about steroids and jiu-jitsu. And great blog post. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, of course. I urge everybody to read it. You know, I consider jiu-jitsu a martial art first, and there's definitely a sport aspect to it. But you know, the way it influences my life and the way it's changing things off the mat, definitely would be a martial art before it would be a sport. In my book, I know a lot of people, like, if I'm in deep competition mode, sure, I'm going to consider it a sport mentally. That's going to help me. But so people who train jiu-jitsu, some of them are obviously doing steroids. That's just how it is, you know. And John has some very interesting comments to say about this. He's definitely anti-steroid. He says these practices go against everything that BJJ is all about. Instead, choose the work, choose the struggle, stay clear of shortcuts and unhealthy choices. And seriously, it is how we live our lives, how we can extract the most joy out of living, how we can help others along the way. These things are more important than taking drugs so we can get a competitive or combative edge over our peers. Seriously? So that's a very powerful statement that he makes, and makes you consider, hey, you know, you might have teammates, you might have considered doing this yourself, you might have done steroids yourself, and there's just so much more to jiu-jitsu, and enjoying the struggle that comes along with it. You know, if you're on the easy road in jiu-jitsu, you're doing the wrong martial art, the wrong sport anyway. You know, this is not an easy thing. So, and if you want a competitive edge, this isn't the right answer. Make some techniques really good. You know, hone parts of your game. Make those BJJ bricks, those weapons that your opponent doesn't expect, and that gives you a nice advantage. But to try to avoid part of the struggle, that's what you're doing. You're trying to shortcut things. You're trying to avoid the struggle and the grinds that are part of your journey by taking steroids. So really reflect on what you're doing if you're considering that option. And read John Will's article, Fool's Gold. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Very insightful, short article, but like always, he packs a ton of information in a couple of little paragraphs, and very insightful. So thank you for that contribution. If he's been a past guest on the show, if you are a listener to the podcast and you have a blog and you write articles that are jiu-jitsu related, send them our way, bjjbrick@gmail.com. We're always looking for articles, and if you're willing to listen to us talk about jiu-jitsu every week, you probably would write an article that we would appreciate, I would think. So don't be shy about it. We'd love to help promote other blogs and websites, and and read other people's opinions. That's part of what the article of the week is all about. You know, it can't just be what Gary and I think every week. You know, that's one of the reasons we bring people like Mark Fisher on, to bring other people's insights, other people's point of views to the show. And article of the week, no matter what the show is about, you're going to get an article that's different than the main show topic, it seems like, and that's helps diversify the show and make it fun for everybody. So there's our article of the week. Definitely urge you, if you are writing about jiu-jitsu, send it our way. It's a pleasure to communicate with our listeners who, any listener, but definitely if you have a blog, you know, we like to help you out a little bit. Well, without any further ado, I think it's time to bring Mark Fisher onto the BJJ Break podcast. We're going to learn about his Facebook page rollout. We're going to learn about some great coaching philosophies in jiu-jitsu and helping your teammates with their personal struggles and with their journey in jiu-jitsu. So here is our interview. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
When he gets someone in a calf slicer, all baby cows scream in pain or walk with a limp. He created the Great Lakes with a heavy side mount. He could jump into a muddy pond and catch Turtle Man without getting bit.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Mark Fisher to the BJJ Break podcast. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Byron. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're training, and what brings you onto the show.
Well, let's see. I have been training BJJ for about 10 years now. So when I first started, I was hopping around quite a bit, traveling and training in college and doing a lot of things. I eventually settled in Athens, Georgia for grad school and spent about 6 years training at a hardcore gym there with Adam and Rory Singer. And then moved away after I graduated and have been training in Portland, Oregon at Straight Blast Gym under Matt Thornton for about 2 years now.
That's cool.
And
so
what's that?
what rank are you? Belt-wise?
I'm a brown belt. So I've been a brown belt for about a year and a half.
You train mostly gi, no gi? Or?
So in the Georgia days, for most of it, it was no gi. It was a big MMA gym. Although since for about that last year of the time I was in Athens, they were also training gi. But in Portland, it's really interesting. They mostly train gi and do just a little bit of no gi. So I was the guy in the Georgia gym who was like, let's do gi. And now at the Portland gym, I'm the guy who's like, let's do no gi. So yeah, a little bit of both.
Oh, cool. You're on here today partly because interview we had a few weeks ago kind of got a discussion started about people of different sexual preferences training jiu-jitsu, and I asked, you know, if there's a community that's out there that I could mention or we could talk about, it would be great to have somebody on to represent that. So could you just tell us a little bit about you have a Facebook page called Roll Out Jiu-Jitsu, is that correct?
Yeah, we do, right? So I myself am a gay grappler, and the group Roll Out is basically a group that connects all kinds of LGBTQI people across the world, right? So it's a public page, and you can just like the page, and you should like the page even if you're not LGBTQI, if only to let other people know that that's something that you're comfortable with and that's something worth liking. But anyway, the URL is facebook.com/rolloutjujitsu, all one word. And basically it's a place where we post articles related to LGBTQ athletics or, interesting coming out stories for queer identifying athletes. And there's also a private group that's associated with it, but it's private. So if you are LGBTQI and you want to ask about coming out or finding a more hospitable gym or something where you want to start training jiu-jitsu, but you're not sure where or how to navigate the coming out process, you could message one of the administrators of the public page, and we'll let you join the private group where you can talk in sort of a less public environment about it.
That's great. I just I'm on the page right now. I just clicked the like button. So I guess if anybody else that I know, I guess could see that I'm supporting this community, even though, like you say, I may not fit exactly in the category, but I'm on the side of supporting this community. And if you want to grapple, I'm here to grapple and share jiu-jitsu.
Isn't that what we're all here for, right?
Yes.
And yeah, definitely much appreciated that you did that. That's awesome.
So I encourage anybody. Most people are on their mobile phones and listen to this on their on some app or something. But just go to Facebook and type in "Roll Out Jiu-Jitsu" after in your Facebook thing. You need the whole word, including jiu-jitsu, and it'll pop right up and join the community there.
Yeah, and we're also apparently on Twitter at RolloutBJJ. Again, all one word.
Okay, that's good, and that's another resource and a place for the community to meet. Tell me a little bit about your story and a little bit about your history.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I trained for 6 years in Georgia. So I'd been training for about 2 years before moving to Georgia, and I'd say for about the first 5 years I was there, I was not out to anybody at the gym. So I didn't really tell a soul, right? And then in the last year and a half or so, I slowly started coming out to just a handful of training partners. But I'll tell you what, like the whole don't ask, don't tell thing.
Yeah.
It in practice, it's terrible. It doesn't make any sense, right? It's having experienced that and having kept that to myself for a long time, thinking to myself, maybe it's not something people will be comfortable with. I didn't want to lose like training partners for people like being uncomfortable grappling with me or whatever. So I was really worried when I started out. It turns out that all of those worries were ridiculous, as we'll get to. But also just like not mentioning aspects of your dating or love life is actually something that's really tough to do in a gym setting where people are constantly talking about that and things like sex come up in conversation frequently, right? So, referring back to Kurt Osiander's interview with you a couple of weeks ago, he casually mentions his divorce unsolicited in the podcast while you guys are talking, right? So it's tough to not have those things come out in everyday conversation, right? So if you're someone who is not telling, right, then you're constantly self-editing, right? And you're not letting your training partners get to know this huge aspect of your life, right? So it gets really awkward, right? So it got to the point where it was really stressful for me to hang out with these people at the gym in non-training context, so any like social events. I was constantly worried that somebody would ask me whether I had a girlfriend or whether I was dating a girl, and very few people ever did ask me, which in itself I think was informative for me that most people probably either knew or suspected, and were just like graceful enough not to ask. But it was definitely, there was a barrier there for me getting to know these people with whom I spent a huge chunk of my life on the mat, and became family to me, Like, I loved my training partners. They're awesome. And it was definitely a barrier for them getting to know me as well.
You said it took about 5 years and you started to tell a few of your close friends. Do you think that's a common experience for people?
I hope not. I hope not. Because it sucks, right? It sucks, man. Like having to keep that to yourself for such a long time. I hope and suspect that it's, like the trend in general, right, is people are coming out in like middle school and grade school these days, right? So people are coming out sooner, and I think it's for the better for everybody to be aware that there are, in fact, a lot of LGBTQI people out there, and things that you say or do around them definitely affect them. So, so I finally came out. Yeah, don't do what I did, right? Definitely come out sooner rather than later. I mean, provided you're not like in fear of your well-being. Because when I did, right, when I finally did let a lot of people know in Georgia, I just got this like tremendous outpouring of support, right? Everyone was super awesome. Lots of people had like gay siblings or other gay friends they knew. Didn't affect how they trained with me or whether they wanted to train with me at all. Everyone was just so chill about it, and it was awesome. So I'd like to think, or I'd like to hope that that would be sort of the majority response that most people at most gyms would have. But I just don't know about that.
Yeah. I'm limited with my personal experiences, but in my interview that I had with John Will, we talked about this 20, 40, 60 rule. When you're 20 years old, you are concerned what everybody thinks about you. When you're 40 years old, you don't care what they think about you. And by the time you hit 60, you realize nobody is thinking about you, and you're probably making a big deal out of things that people don't really have a concern over. And I think about that a little bit. Like, I'm sure this was a huge deal for you, and maybe there's some people that actually mattered too, but most people they already knew you. They accepted you for who you were, and I think that doing that probably paved the way for anybody else, especially at that gym, that can come in and meet you, and you could tell them this is a good place to train.
Yeah, I hope so. It's funny that you mentioned that, right? Because I show up to the Portland gym, right? And Portland's like an ultra liberal place in general, right? I mean, there's people like there's LGBT people holding hands down the street. It's just like, it's a cool place to live. So I walk into the gym, and I don't want to make the same mistake I made in Georgia. So I pretty much instantly just come out to everybody, right? Like, I just start talking about my partner, right? It's not a secret. I bring him to social events. And it was like really anticlimactic. Everyone was just like, okay, so? And I was like, where's my parade? Like, where, you know? But no, that's awesome. Like, it is funny that very few people actually care, which is great. Which is awesome.
Care in like in a negative way. Like
we're concerned. Yeah,
you did get care, and you did get people that supported you and wanted to back you, which is nice as well.
Exactly. Yeah, nothing but amazing support for sure from everyone, both in the Georgia gym and the Portland gym.
So you started, I think the name's cool, Roll Out. You know, like that's a, I guess it shows your stance on what, you encourage people to come out sooner than later, you know. So, I got the email from you, and you mentioned that, and it's like, that's a cool name for this organization and a Facebook group, or a Facebook page and group, I guess. So,
yeah, I can't take credit for it. Actually, so one of the sort of co-founders of the group definitely coined the term, but it's perfect, isn't it? I thought it was great. We definitely have a visibility problem in the jiu-jitsu community for sure. So I was telling you right before you started the interview, in the past, so I've been grappling for 10 years now, and I have only ever encountered and rolled with 2 openly gay men in my whole, like, hundreds of training partners that I've had. That's only happened to me twice, which is just ridiculous, right? So, and I've never rolled with a trans person. Like, so there's zero trans visibility in the community as well. Few more lesbians than there are gay men, but LGBTQI people in general, extremely underrepresented in the jiu-jitsu world specifically.
So what's up? Tell me. I mean, it's hard to know any kind of numbers as far as what we have in our jiu-jitsu community, but that's not 100. You rolled hundreds of people, and 2, you found that's not. either they're not in our community or they're not out in our community. What do you think is going on there?
Exactly. So I think it's both. I think that, there are two reasons we're not seeing that. One is, unlike a lot of other minorities, right? LGBTQI people in general are a cryptic minority, right? So you can't just tell. Well, maybe you can, right? I guess they've done studies where it's pretty easy to assess somebody's sexual orientation just by looking at them, but or by interacting with them. But in general, right, on a mat, it's really tough to tell whether somebody is queer identifying or not, right? Because it's not something that you're immediately going to talk about unless you get to know them better. Like if you have like a really consistent training partner, right? So if I just like visit a gym somewhere, I'm not going to immediately know, okay, that dude I rolled with was gay. That dude I rolled with was definitely not gay, right? It's not something that you get a really good sense for. So I think part of the problem is definitely that we are not letting ourselves be visible to other people, other LGBTQI people in the community, which is something that we could be certainly better at. So I think in your previous episode you had Emily Kwok on, which, by the way, hi Emily. And she mentioned that in her early days of training, like seeing another girl at a gym somewhere was like seeing a unicorn, right? And you're just like, oh my God, that's so great. So yeah, imagine how awesome it would be to find somebody who has a queer identifying or is a queer identifying person, so immediately like that person has very similar life experiences to you, and it's like this immediate simpatico, right, between you guys. It's really awesome. So I get super pumped whenever I meet somebody who's LGBTQI identifying at the gym. It just like makes my day. But I would have no way of knowing that unless somebody told me. Right, so I think that's part of the problem is that people aren't out at the gym, and I think that needs to change. It's definitely something that we should do for each other and for the next generation of young grapplers who might see that the adult grapplers are out and open about their sexual and gender identities, and this is something that maybe I as a kid shouldn't be so stressed about growing up. And then the other thing is, these kind of don't ask, don't tell policies or attitudes at gyms where they might actually be either perceived as or actually be inhospitable to or less hospitable to LGBTQI people. So I think there's definitely a bias in terms of not attracting LGBTQI people to the sport because it's perceived as an inhospitable place, and we are not coming out at these places, both of which are contributing to the visibility problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So I'm trying to think of somebody who wants to try jiu-jitsu for the first time, and this is where people aren't trying it because of maybe our numbers is off because people don't even want to try jiu-jitsu because of what they experience when they go one time or the second time. What would be a way to test out a school? I mean, clearly if you're in a city that has 3 or 4 different gyms, you want to get the right gym for yourself, no matter who you are. So go, check them out. But what are some clues or some things you could look for to find a friendly gym?
Well, apparently one way you can find out is you can just go on Yelp and look at the Yelp reviews. But if that's something that you are looking at, I think that's the point of rollout of our page on Facebook. Actually, is that's the kind of information we would be sharing in the private group. So if you're like, hey, I'm new to the Portland area, what kind of gym are there LGBTQ people here who train, and if so, at what gyms? What gyms are not really hospitable for that? you guys have any experiences where you can suggest one way or the other, right? So we're hoping that if we get enough people involved in the group, we'll have, people on the ground who have experiences in all these different places who can speak to it.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's been a long time since I've, tried to gym as a white belt, but when you go in the door for that first time, you may or may not get much interaction with the main instructor or even some of the coaches, but you're going to have interaction with who could be your future teammates. And a lot of times the culture of the gym is set by the main instructor. I mean, obviously everyone's an individual, but if you feel like the people that are training there could be your friends, if they knew who you were, I think that might be something that I would look for in trying to kind of shop around. And it's not, no gym should make you sign up the day you walk in to look at them. They should let you see what it's like, and you should be able to test out a few gyms to find the right one for you. I think that's pretty standard in this industry. But I think that trying to evaluate your teammates, because you're not always going to get a good evaluation of the coach and just showing up at once or twice. But I think that would be maybe a way to kind of test the waters in the atmosphere there. Do you think that would be accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think, definitely you can put your finger on the pulse of the ethos of the gym most easily by looking at the people who are in the gym. So, yeah, I mean, maybe not like the people who are your teammates on the first day. I imagine that a lot of them won't be the same people that you end up training with if you stick with it for 4 years,
Yeah.
So it might even be something to pay attention to look at the higher belts, right? The blue belts or the purple belts, and see whether any of them have kind of attitude problems or say anything stupid, or unwelcoming for your particular demographic. Because, if you have like one bad training partner who's like a homophobe or whatever, and this is their first day too, chances are good if the culture of the gym doesn't support that, those people aren't going to last long in that gym anyway.
Yeah, that's great advice. Look at the people who have been at the gym for a little while. Obviously, you can tell by the color of their belt, unless they're just new and they've moved or something like that. But you could kind of get maybe a better feel for the gym by looking at the students who have been training with this instructor for a long time and kind of get an idea of the environment. I didn't think about that, but that makes a lot of sense to me. I mentioned this before in the interview with Kurt Osiander after the interview. Like, I'm not real knowledgeable in this topic. It's not. I don't spend a lot of time online researching it, and I don't have any life experiences. Have a few friends and a few family members, but I don't really have what I would consider to be a good knowledge of this topic. So you refer to your community as LGBTQI. Could you just kind of inform me what that stands for?
Yeah. So I hope I get the acronyms right. So the L is for lesbian, the G is for gay, the B is for bisexual, the T is for trans, the Q is for queer, and the I believe is for intersex, right? So we just keep on acquiring more and more letters as the community becomes more inclusive, which is awesome. But I think it's another sort of blanket word that you may or may not be comfortable with that some people use is just queer people, right? So anybody who identifies non-normatively in terms of orientation or gender identity would be considered queer. But that's definitely a word that's really loaded and problematic that has been kind of reappropriated by the LGBTQI community. So I can totally understand why people might not necessarily be comfortable with that. It's just LGBTQI has a lot of syllables, so it can be say.
Yeah.
But LGBTQI or LGBT, often you just hear it kind of abbreviated like that too. But
okay, that's good to know, and I'm learning here. One of the things I think that might provide somewhat of a hurdle in maybe somebody coming out or even trying Jiu-Jitsu would be like the idea that this is like you could sexualize Jiu-Jitsu and you could, you're touching other people and you're touching other people's bodies and they're touching you. And it seems like there's a certain time in your training where you don't think about it. It's not like the first day, it's kind of weird, but after a little while, you're just training. It's just grappling. It's just jiu-jitsu. It's just your teammates. It doesn't seem to, maybe that's just my own personal experience, but I don't think about it at all. I could train with anybody and not think about, not sexualize the grappling aspect of it. It's not an issue for me. Do you think that's a hurdle in somebody who's either new to the sport or who's thinking about trying it? Like it may be, well, I don't want to make anybody feel weird about it. Do people sexualize jiu-jitsu that they shouldn't be?
I mean, you're totally right in that goes away very, very quickly, right? It's not something that even crosses your mind.
Yeah.
Once you're used to it. So I remember the very first day I did jiu-jitsu, like one of my friends told me to check out Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I had no idea what it was. And I showed up to this gym and some guy was like, "Oh, great, mount me." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he was just like, "Mount me." And I was like, "Yeah. You might have to buy me a drink first for that one." I don't know what this means, and this is really weird, right? So, like, when you first start it, you're like, this is super bizarre, right? And especially, like, it's hilarious. So I teach beginners, right? And it's hilarious in retrospect, right? As a brown belt to watch men and women roll together, right? And like, a guy who's like supposed to be like pressuring on a girl's chest is like, "Oh my God, there's things there that I can't touch, and this is really weird," right? But like, if you're rolling with like a black belt woman, right, like who will destroy you if you think twice about that kind of thing, like it doesn't cross your mind, right? You're not thinking I shouldn't be touching there. You're just thinking I need to post, right? And I'm posting where I post, right? And it's maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm saying things. Maybe I don't have a majority opinion on that. But
I think you're right.
But it's not weird, right? It's not like guys roll with girls all the time, and there's no, as far as I know, there's not like sexual tension there, right? If somebody's about to beat you up, knock you unconscious, break your arm, right? There are more urgent matters to think about.
Yeah.
And it's the same with, a gay guy rolling with another guy. Like, it just doesn't cross your mind. There are easier ways to find dates, for sure.
Yeah. So, I appreciate you sharing your story of the first time you trained. I could see that kind of raising a flag. It's like, okay, this is unusual. But, you get collar choked once and you get collar choked again, and it suddenly, this position and the person who's on you, it's a different deal. You got to get your head in the game. You've got to. That's one great thing about jiu-jitsu. I can't be thinking about my bills I have or
exactly.
work that's stressful or my next podcast interview. I can't think about anything. I got to think about this person who I'm grappling with, and I got to be thinking about what I want to do and what they might do, and how could I change the course of events to favor me. That's one of the great things that, as I've done interviews, people always like that. They always like to be, there's no cell phone, there's no Facebook, it's just you, another person, get your head in the game and do what you've trained to do. I mean, that's a beautiful aspect of it.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more, right? It's really meditative in that sense, right? Where everything else melts away except for the problem you were trying to solve. And that's just so cool and so refreshing. Right, nothing can put you in the zone, I think, as quickly as jiu-jitsu can.
Or as quickly as not being in the zone and getting choked.
Right.
So
put you out of the zone.
Yeah. But that feeling is there a little bit at the beginning, but it seems to fade, maybe as weeks go by, or as, your first time you get choked or something like that. But, it becomes not a big deal for most grapplers. I would basically all grapplers, but if you give it some time, it's just two people that are trying to play a game basically, or work their game against somebody else, and you're using your body against theirs and trying to outsmart somebody on the mat. It shouldn't be a sexual experience for anybody.
I agree.
It doesn't matter.
I agree, right? Even if, you just, again, you don't have time to have it even cross your mind. It doesn't cross your mind.
And it's not, I mean, even if you had time, it's not where your mind should be. You know what I mean? If you start to do that, then you're walking on a whole different road of why are you in class and what are you getting out of it? You're here to train jiu-jitsu, and that's what your teammates are there for, and that's what a good teammate, if that's what you want to be as a good teammate, that's what you're there for. You get your head in the game, and we're here to do jiu-jitsu. It doesn't, I don't know how to really speak of it very well, but I mean, that's what we're here for. It doesn't seem to affect the way I think when I roll.
Yeah.
So did jiu-jitsu change for you much after you came out, or was it just a less stressful experience, or did you just really feel like you were part of the family there, or how did that change the experience of rolling?
So much. It changed so much. I mean, even when I was in Georgia and was coming out, like that last year, I was so much more social than I was all the 5 years beforehand, right? I was texting people, going out to drinks, hanging out. So it definitely affected my social life a ton. And I just feel like I got to know my training partners who, again, you spend just an inordinate amount of your life with these people on a mat. Why would you not want to get to know what they're like and the other aspects of their lives? So yeah, it definitely helped a lot with the social aspect of it. And maybe even more so in Portland, having from day one been out, right? I can bring my partner to social events. Like, that is so cool, right? It's just so great that everyone's just like, oh, hey, this is my partner. And everyone's just like, oh, cool. Good to meet you. Why aren't you doing jiu-jitsu? And I have the same question, So it makes the whole quality of the experience change, for way the better. For sure.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad to hear that. And we mentioned a little bit about team and support. So from my point of view, what could I do to either foster a positive environment for people to train in, or to help people come out, or to not hide who they are?
It's a good question. I mean, the answer is there's lots of things you can do, right? So, I mean, you can start out by not using words like faggot, right? In the gym, which of course you don't do. I mean, in general could avoid those kinds of words. Yeah. There's over 1 million words in the English language, and it's one of the most verbose languages in the world. Shouldn't be hard to find a synonym for something pejorative, right? Without having to use words like faggot. So it's just ridiculous that we still use that word, right? It's so, even if it doesn't mean anything affiliated with homosexual to you, right? It may mean something different to the person who's hearing it, right? So it's a super loaded term for most gay people I know. So if you're saying words like that, even if you don't mean them to mean homosexual, right? People are perceiving it. LGBTQI people are perceiving it a different way. And if you say that in front of a kid who's going through some shit right now, right? Who might be LGBTQI identifying or struggling with his or her identity, and they're getting bullied in school, and they're walking by kids who are muttering things like faggot under their breath, and then they hear their coach say something like that in the gym, right? That's now a role model who's saying that too, right? And that kid is now learning to associate some major component of their identity with words that other people use to mean pejorative things, right? To mean bad things. So we're just perpetuating this language fucked up the word faggot a long time ago. In a manner of speaking, to borrow from Kurt, right? And now we're just perpetuating it. So yeah, step one, don't use faggot. Step two, maybe sort of be more inclusive in your phrasing of things, right? So, if you're on the mat and talking with somebody, like, instead of saying, "Oh, do you have a girlfriend?" like, maybe say, like, "Oh, are you dating anybody?" Or just, like, be more inclusive with your terms.
Okay.
If even like in casual conversation, if you have like a family member or a friend who's gay, like, maybe talk about them in a positive light, to kind of let people know that that's something that, where their LGBTQI identity doesn't interfere with what you think of them as people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got use language that is respectful, and that spoke to me like as. Nobody has like easy time in school. I mean, schools, you go through middle school, high school, whatever. You're going to have some tough days, and I can't imagine how difficult it could be for some students. And then they come in and hear your coach like disrespecting who you are. That would hurt. It's different than a parent, but it's somebody who you respect and you want the respect of, and then to hear derogatory terms thrown at you, it's like. That's somebody who is in the position to hurt you, and they're doing it. And then the term like, "Are you dating anybody?" That's different than, "Do you have a girlfriend?"
Yeah.
So when you would hear if somebody ask you that, and you weren't out, would that kind of would you pick up on that, the change of words versus do you have a girlfriend?
Or yeah. For sure. So, I mean, people eventually stopped asking me, right? Because I think they definitely realized that I was uncomfortable about it, or suspected that I was gay, and just kind of respected the fact that I wasn't comfortable talking about it. But yeah, at first I would just be like, "Oh no one at the moment." And like, meanwhile, I had a partner,
Yeah.
at home. So it like forces you into this. Sometimes being gay can force you into like, do I make the decision of being honest and just like dropping too much information on this person I might not know very well, or do I lie to them, right? And that's a really uncomfortable scenario to be put in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it could all be resolved a lot easier if somebody realizes that the environment that they're in is really open and hospitable. And just like waiting for them to come out whenever they're ready, then it would be easier.
So I'm trying to, like, from my point of view, if I ask you, I don't know how many years ago before you were out, are you dating anybody? I said that instead of you have a girlfriend. And you said no because you didn't want to tell me anything. And then, well, like if I maybe thought something, but I wanted to let you know, like, hey, but whenever you are dating somebody, I'd be happy to meet them. Is there something that you could say following that up to let them know, like, I'm interested in who you are, and I, what I'm getting at?
Yeah. I mean, so the problem, right, as somebody who's supportive of somebody who's LGBTQI, is you don't know whether they have even come out to themselves yet, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to be like, hey, I know that you might be gay. You might not know that yet, right? So it's definitely, it puts you guys we people, I guess I'm also in that boat, it puts us in an uncomfortable situation where we don't want to force anybody out of the closet, but we want to let them know that it's an okay environment in which to do it. So yeah, I don't know how I would follow up, questions about somebody's dating life, but just it's something that I noticed a lot at the gym, especially in those later years in Georgia, was I had a couple of friends who were saying things like, "Oh, I just found out that my brother is gay, and I can't believe it took him this many years to feel comfortable telling us. Like, I'm such a supportive person on that front." And so immediately I was like, okay, well, he's either trying to hint to me that he knows I'm gay and he wants me to tell him, right? Or he's just like letting me know that he's so comfortable with this. And either way, like that's putting the ball in my court, right? And that's awesome. Like I went home and it just made my day. I was just like, that's so cool.
Yeah, you're able to get like
so
a
he
little...
found a really kind of like slick way of letting me know he was okay with it without sort of forcing me to come out at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that most people could probably, if they wanted to, could probably do that. And you don't, I mean, jiu-jitsu is so much more than just learning how to choke people and to do arm bars. I mean, it's the community that we're building and the relationships you have with your teammates and your friends. And that's just, you have somebody who's a friend and you don't know for sure about them, just kind of give an example in your life of you giving support to somebody and not make a big deal out of it. Let them, like they might be jumping up and down, inside, but they're going to play cool and whatever, and you're excited. Like you might have somebody who would be supportive of you if you decided to tell them more about yourself. And
exactly.
You mentioned, Emily Kwok on here, that it's like a unicorn. It's got to be, when she would go in there and see another woman training, could you imagine that there are other women training, but you don't know it. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's even
like you've been rolling with a woman for years and you had no idea. Right? That would be so cool, right? If you found out and you're like, oh my gosh, let's talk about that.
But Emily, in her interview, also mentioned that some people in jiu-jitsu have leadership roles that they may or may not, use correctly. She kind of implied that some coaches are pretty famous and they have a lot of people that follow and respect them, but they don't have the qualities of a good leader. They just maybe have qualities of good jiu-jitsu, and those are two different things. So,
for sure.
I look at what you're doing and this is definitely a leadership thing. You're starting this community here on Facebook and you're trying to build support for the people around the world that want to try jiu-jitsu or maybe they are doing jiu-jitsu and they're just having some troubles, I guess would say. So I definitely appreciate you taking this leadership role and sharing your story and giving support to the community.
Well, you bet. I definitely should say that I was not the only one who started the group, and we're definitely not alone, right? So we have these little spheres of people we know in our personal networks, right? So there are a lot of people who have joined the rollout group from Portland and from San Francisco, right? Places where, the founders are coming from. But we don't know a lot about a lot of these other gyms, right? We have some information now about the Washington D.C. area too, but so the more people who sort of join, the more information we'll have, and the wider the network will be. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a thing that needed to happen, and somebody needed to do it, and I'm glad we were the ones who did it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're out there as well. And I mentioned that, during my interview or after the interview with Kurt that I didn't see a community online. And it'd be nice if there was one to let us know and so we'd be able to share that with everybody. And so by simply going to the page and liking it, maybe somebody who's mutual friends with you can go to that page and you pop up as somebody who would support them. Support you in what you're doing. So you are a brown belt. You train at Straight Blast Gym.
Yep.
I've had a lot of people from Straight Blast on the podcast, and they've all given some great information. So I really want to kind of pick your brain about jiu-jitsu as well.
Sure. Yeah.
So before we get into that aspect of it, tell me like a little bit about some of maybe your favorite techniques and things that how you like to roll and a little bit about your side of jiu-jitsu.
Well, I'm a tiny guy, so I definitely have a small man's game. So I think an advantage of that is I definitely have to rely a lot on technique. A disadvantage maybe, or a liability, maybe something that prevents me from learning as quickly as I otherwise could, is that I also happen to be pretty flexible. So, it helps me squirreling out of positions so I don't get immediately punished for making terrible mistakes, and it also, I can do some things that other people would have had to rely more on technique to do. So I'm trying very slowly to remove all of those bad habits from my game. But in terms of like favorite positions and favorite things to do, I'm definitely a back take guy. So no gi, I definitely like rear naked chokes, gi, bow and arrow chokes, triangles, probably my next highest submission.
Well,
is that what you asked?
Yeah. Okay. So I could relate. I'm not a large grappler by any means, but when I grapple somebody who's larger than me, I want to get on their back. Like that's a pretty good place to be. I feel better than mounting. A lot of times you can get rolled over, and in side control you can't really apply as much pressure as sometimes you would like. But you get on their back, and it almost like takes away the size advantage that they have, and you're just going for the choke and trying to maintain control of somebody who's so much bigger and stronger. So I could definitely relate to that. You mentioned flexibility. And you mentioned it almost like it was a negative thing. I think in jiu-jitsu, it's easy to say, "Oh, that guy's strong. That guy is using his strength in a way that's not jiu-jitsu. It's not a good thing." But a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, flexibility is seen as like, "Oh, hey, I'm flexible. That's a plus one in my category of rolling." But it's the same thing as it's an attribute of your body. It's an attribute of what you have, and you may not always have your flexibility.
Exactly, right? You get older, you get a couple shoulder injuries, and all of a sudden your shoulder's not as flexible as it used to be, So it's definitely something that you should treat as transient, right? And not make it a permanent part of your game, because it's not transient, right? If you're going to stay in jiu-jitsu for a long time, you can't rely on that, right? But the good news is that your game is going to adjust over time, right?
Yeah.
You don't become all of a sudden totally inflexible from one day to the next. So, there's this grace period that you probably have where you can pick up the techniques that you once had your flexibility as a crutch for. But why not start now, right? Why not just get good at technique instead of having to rely on this little crutchy scaffold thing that is your flexibility, right? And I'm not saying that like flexibility doesn't feature prominently in my game. It does. But it's funny when people tell me I'm flexible, like, "Oh, you're so flexible. I wish I were that flexible," or "I can't believe you did that." It actually bothers me, right? So, because I'm like, no, I'm trying not to be flexible. And I swear that was all in my hip movement. That wasn't in like bringing my leg to my face, right? It was in my hip mobility. So now I kind of just take it as like a slap in the face where I'm just like, he thinks I'm flexible. He doesn't think I have good technique,
Yeah. I could relate, having rolled with a lot of flexible people, and a lot of, it's an easy comparison with strength, but it could be the same as speed or anything like that. But it's, when you roll someone who's a lot stronger than you, it can be an uncomfortable experience. So that you're like, "Well, that sucked. He's just strong. There's nothing I can do about that." Yeah, I need better technique, but it's so hard because they're so strong. But when they're flexible, it's frustrating. Like I have you in side control and you escaped with the technique I didn't think was going to work. I didn't think you could do that. And so it's like a little complaint, but it's not the same as like me having to suffer the discomfort of that. It's like, man, I can't believe it. That just happened. They just escaped.
Guy for having that. Yeah.
So, but it shows like your level of thinking about your training, that like that's not how you want to roll. Nope. Yes, your flexibility will be there for you in a match that's important, or in a situation where you are really needing it. But the proper answer is to try to use that at a very limited aspect, and maybe use your flexibility when you're rolling with somebody who's just outclassing you and just beating you. Like a lot of times I tell white belts, I don't care if you use your strength. That's fine. But I don't want you to use your strength against other white belts. Like, it's not going to do any good. But
right.
Use it against me, that's going to be okay. Same thing with like, maybe there's no reason to just roll and get annihilated if you could use your flexibility. But the proper answer is probably, move your hips more and get to a stronger frame or a better position where flexibility is not even a factor for you, because like you said, it may not always be there for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, you basically said the same thing, so I'm just rehashing it. So that's pretty cool. if you have a teammate or a student that's going to do their first tournament, what advice would you give them before they do this in order to help them perform well and to be able to use what they know?
So advice that some of my coaches at Straight Blast give to newbie competitors definitely resonated with me as well, even as a little bit more seasoned of a competitor, which is don't try to incorporate new shit into your game right before you go to compete, right? Because it's not going to be something that you're going to recall very easily in times of stress, which competition is. Which is different from saying don't have a plan, right? I mean, I think that there is merit to having some kind of plan, but that plan shouldn't be a new game that you constructed this week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, that's part of the problem with our modern jiu-jitsu. It's great that, this online community that we have and how you could reach out and you could connect people from around the world who have the same worries and concerns that you do. But also, you hop on Facebook and I got 9 techniques I can scroll through in 10 minutes while I'm going down the page and none of them fit my game, but I don't know that, so I'm going to click on them and open them up and it's just like, that's not what you need to do, when you're preparing for a tournament or a match. You got to stick with what you're good at and make that even a little bit better.
I agree totally. I think chess is like a perfect metaphor in this case, right? In chess, you have a whole bunch of different openings, right? You can take your knight out, you can move your pawns out in front of the king or whatever. I'm not a big chess guy, so that's probably where the extent of the metaphor stops for me. But you have these different openings, and you could get really good at your favorite opening, right? So you have a reasonable expectation of the few ways that your opponent can respond to that particular opening, and then the game just gets really complex from there, right? Just like it does in jiu-jitsu, right? If you go for a particular takedown, okay, the person might sprawl, or the person might do this, and then you have a few options going out, but and as the match goes on, right, you can't plan the whole match in the same way you can't plan the whole chess match, right? But you can plan for the opening, right? So rather than, if you've been taking that pawn out in front of the king for your past 80 games of chess, and then it gets to the time when you're at a chess competition and you're like, oh, I'm going to do the knight this time. So you have no expectations for how people are going to react to you now starting with the knight. Right, so even though the game gets really complex and you should have, responses for lots of different things coming your way, I think having a good opening plan is probably a good thing to go with. Awesome,
and I think having a good opening plan calms the nerves, because midway through a match you're not nervous anymore. You're like we said, you get your head in the game. You're working your match, but before the match starts, what's going to happen? What am I getting into? If you have a game plan at the beginning, you should be a lot more calm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely.
And I like your example with chess. If you move the same piece every time and then you get into it, I'm going to move this one instead.
Womp womp. Yeah. That's like,
and I like to look at it like you get a student who says, I'm just going to go out there and see what happens. If you want to do that, that's fine. But you won't be likely to beat somebody who is a little bit better than you in this match. It's just not going to happen. And there's not much of a better feeling than beating somebody who's probably better at jiu-jitsu than you, because you stuck to your game and you brought them into your world and they couldn't handle, if you're going to triangle somebody from your guard and you say, I'm going to play top game. Well, your best technique is triangle from the guard and you're not going to play that. They're not going to get the best out of you, and that's okay.
You're handicapping yourself, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's just, some students want to go out there and have fun and just to see what happens. But if you have that game plan like you're recommending, you'll be able to occasionally beat somebody who's probably better at jiu-jitsu than you, because you brought them into your game and they couldn't deal with it. In that small aspect of your game that you really worked on, that's where you're strongest.
Right, yeah. If you have a blue belt triangle and a white belt mount game, play your blue belt triangle game. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect example. Talking a little bit about game plan, if somebody's looking to compete, how would they find their game plan?
Oh, wow.
Is it just,
that's a good question. I mean, so, I haven't met a lot of people who, unless they're very, very new, but if they've been grappling for a couple months, they have a pretty good sense of the things they're good at.
Yeah.
And the things they're bad at. And good, I mean in the relative sense, right? So like better than other people who have had the same amount of experience, so SBG, you probably, I don't know, maybe are aware, there's a huge emphasis on position, and posture rather than, all these crazy permutations of fun techniques that you can play off of those like core positions.
Yeah.
So I would say as long as like the thing you're best at is not like, triangling somebody from cross-sides bottom, in like kind of a Hail Mary where you're not advancing your position at all. And if you miss it, like you're putting yourself into an even worse scenario. Then go whatever you're good with, right? So again, let me recap that because that was really convoluted. But unless like if your best thing is a Hail Mary, get a new best thing.
Yes.
But if you're good at a position, right, or good at some particular dominant position, and you are aware that you're good at that, that's the card you need to play in competition.
Yeah, I like the way you say it, and you can get a new best thing. Like that's,
yes,
it's not, you're not stuck.
You go through these really weird, like love affairs with positions. I like recently had like a sort of a neck related thing. So I'm on like a no choke, kick right now where, I'm not allowed to choke my opponent. My opponent's not allowed to choke me. And it has like opened up, my armbar game. And and then in a couple of months that'll disappear. It'll be as if I've forgotten how to armbar, right? And then it'll come back in another year or two, right? So that happens all the time where you just get these like little surges of a new favorite position, and it's a really fun time when you're going through that. It's a fun time to be grappling.
That's interesting to me that. Not that you're not allowed to choke, but your opponents aren't choking you either. So, your hands could get somewhere where they're not typically a safe spot for you, and you could maybe find something that, is totally new and that you didn't see before.
Yeah. So right now, I guess we're on the risk of getting ourselves into bad habits where we're putting ourselves in choke vulnerability, right? So it's definitely in our mutual interest to still show each other where the chokes are, but it's been cool to kind of be forced to explore new parameter space in the jiu-jitsu world.
Yeah, it's just a interesting way to train. I mean, when you train, all you do is go roll, you're limiting your own development as far as creativity and being able to change the way things that you do affect how you're rolling, I guess. I mean, if you could do a little bit of I'm trying to think of different, like next to a wall and like we're not going to go over left no matter what because there's a wall there. That's going to change the way you're going to move. If you're not going to choke, that's going to change the way you're moving. And it's going to change what you're trying to do. Interesting dynamic and definitely if you could find a training partner that wants to try that with you and not do any chokes and see what happens. Maybe you find something to do better. Maybe your arm bars get a little bit sharper.
Yeah, putting these like weird fake restrictions on your game somehow becomes like an engine for creativity sometimes, right? So, like, have you ever done like improv?
Yeah, a little bit, not at a professional level, of course, but yeah.
Same situation. Like very bad at it in college. But like if you were to just do a blank scene. All right, just like you and I create an improv scene, it might not be very great, but like if you put a restriction on us, like we can only, we have to start each sentence with a different letter in alphabetical order or something, right? That restriction in itself will make our scene more creative, more interesting, right? In the same way that like placing these artificial restrictions on your game, like, today I'm only gonna go from bottom positions and try to get out of bottom positions, or today I'm gonna focus on Kimuras, or today I'm gonna try not to use my left hand, right? Just any kind of restriction will definitely show you things that you haven't seen in your game before, right? Which is why I don't know if this is a common experience for you, but for me, like when I get injured and I can't use something as well as I'm used to using it, like I suck for a couple days, and then my brain like figures out other things it could do to compensate for that, and I end up discovering these new features of my game that I hadn't seen before. I don't know. Is that something?
Yeah, I think I've experienced that too. But you mentioned that you focus on positions and posture, and so if you're able to maintain your fundamentals, and then you're restricted in an area, you're going to figure out what to do and continue to grow and to develop as a martial artist. I think that's I've experienced that. Easiest example: you hurt your hand and you have no grip strength in it. You're going to deal with that, like your favorite thing may not work so well, but you'll figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
necessity is the mother of invention. Right?
Yes. And so sometimes at my gym, we'll grab a racquetball and you'll hold the racquetball in your hand. You have no grip in that hand. Deal with it,
that.
And
I might steal from you.
Go for it. It's kind of fun, and it gives everybody an easy out. You get stuck and I can't grab on this, and of course people let go and they forget, but it's a different dynamic, and it's just training in a different way. You might be in a situation where you're rolling on the ground with somebody trying to get control of a gun, and you only have one hand. Well, you got a little bit of background on that. You've only rolled with one hand before, and that's what they're doing. And I don't know. It's just, limiting yourself in what you could do is a great way to be creative and a great way to learn about just your body mechanics, I think.
Totally.
In Jiu-Jitsu, we all see a lot of people kind of come in and they go, and some people stick with it. A lot of people kind of just come in and leave, and you never see them again. So if you look at a group of new students and you want to pick one and say, I think this person is going to stick with it. What would be like a reason you would pick somebody, like a personality trait maybe, or something that you would see the way that they're trying to learn Jiu-Jitsu that would make you think that like they're going to be a good student of Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that, or that it's because something I've definitely noticed recently about my students is I am not very good at predicting who is going to stick with it and not, because I've definitely been surprised by some people. But I think probably one of the strongest indicators is enthusiasm, right? If somebody is like pumped about everything that they're learning and picking up, and just like, oh my gosh, today I did this and today I did that, right? Even if they're not like super vocal about it, but you can just kind of tell, like, there's a light in their eyes and they're like smiling when they're learning stuff. I think that's probably, someone should do statistics on this. Someone should like do a study of just like, what are the strongest predictors of longevity in Jiu-Jitsu? But I imagine that enthusiasm is probably up there.
Yeah.
Attendance too, I'm sure is up there. Right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to kind of lose your way if you miss even just a handful of days when you're first starting out. So we have some new folks at the gym who I think have been doing it for maybe like 9 or 10 months now. One of them in particular, he hasn't missed a day yet at the gym, and it's just insane. Like it's awesome to see people that into it and who have formed this groove in their life already, right? 10 months in, of something to do, right? To train every day or to train every so many days.
Yeah, that's impressive, and like you said, with the enthusiasm, even if maybe you make it in twice a week. I mean, but when you show up, if you're enthusiastic about it and you're passionate about learning Jiu-Jitsu, that's a good trait to have, and that's more likely somebody who will stick with it and become good at Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, I agree. just to follow up on the attendance thing. I don't mean like be batshit crazy about jiu-jitsu. Get the jiu-jitsu tattoo on like your second day of class, because those people tend not to last either, right? They are few and far between, right? The people who just go like balls to the wall on day one. So yeah, a lot of people can go really far, even just going once or twice a week for decades. You know what I mean? If somebody can fall in love that quickly with jiu-jitsu, they could probably fall in love with a lot of other hobbies just as easily that can direct their attention another way, right?
Yeah.
So you can definitely like see some people are just like serial hobby monogamists, you know?
The fact that somebody can go every day just probably means they have a clearer schedule than a lot of people who can only go twice a week, you know? And like you said, you're going twice a week for a couple of decades is an amazing thing, and you will get good at jiu-jitsu if you just hang in there and train when you can. Yeah. So, speaking of that, you know, training a little bit less, what advice would you give to somebody who could only come in and train once or twice a week? How could they get the most out of each training session?
Good question. You're throwing me some good questions here. Keep showing up, right? Is step one. Step two. So we have a coach at our gym who's a black belt, really, really great black belt. And I like him a lot. He's an amazing coach. And he doesn't, these days, I guess, doesn't find, as much time as he would have liked, to train, right? So he's in a couple of days a week training. And he says that he's finding that he has to constantly be refining and shrinking his game, as opposed to, adding more tools to his Swiss Army knife, right? He's just sharpening a few of the tools that are already in his Swiss Army knife, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So he's kind of narrowing down, the things that work best, in his game and just really honing them. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? If you don't have time to explore all of jiu-jitsu parameter space, just get really good at some section of it.
Yeah, that is that's great advice. I mean, if you show up once a week, yes, you'll have a little bit longer of a road of getting to where you want to be in jiu-jitsu. But if you show up that's 4 times a month, 5 times a month, and you train something totally different every time, that's going to really slow down your progress. But if the whole month you're doing arm bars, you're doing escapes from side control, or you have a kind of a theme or a topic, and you kind of narrow down your game a little bit, it's good. You'll be able to improve those areas of your game. I really believe that.
Yeah, totally. Like learning a language, right? It's the same deal, right? If you memorize like the 100 most common words of a language, you could probably get pretty far with just those 100 words, right?
Yeah.
If you wanted to get like fluent in a language, you would have to increase that word count by orders of magnitude, right? Before you became fully competent in a language. So why not get 80% of the language functionality with 10% of the vocab space?
Yeah, I really appreciate this. You're giving great examples that are
not jiu-jitsu related.
Yeah, and it's easier. I mean, if I'm new at jiu-jitsu, I need those. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If I could learn 100 words in a language, I could generally communicate with somebody about what I need to get across. And yeah, it's not going to be pretty, but I have an idea. If I want to get to where I have a conversation with somebody, that's a lot more work. I can't do that, go in a class once a week. So, in the next few years, I got to go all the time. I got to put the time and commitment to it, which is, you need to decide if that's something that's a priority. But it's great example. I don't think I've ever heard the language example, but that's a really easy way to illustrate your point there. So I really appreciate that.
No problem.
So you're building this community here on Facebook. Rollout Jiu-Jitsu. Facebook.com/Rollout Jiu-Jitsu. That's correct, right?
Yeah. And look out for patches, right? So we've just ordered our first set of patches that we're going to be putting on our gis. So if you see somebody with a rollout patch on a tournament or something, go up and say hi, right? Introduce yourself, whether you're LGBTQI or not. And just let us know that, that you're aware of us or want to learn more about about what's going on in that world.
Yeah.
And that said, yeah, if anybody's looking to sponsor Rollout, we could definitely use some more money for patches.
Yeah, and a patch, I mean, it's a simple thing, but you put that on your gi, and maybe nobody sees it, maybe somebody does, but if somebody sees it and they say, hey, all you gotta do is say, hey, like your patch, I saw you compete today, you did good, and I like the patch on your gi, that's cool. That's it. Like, you don't have to ask any questions or say anything else. Like, that's a pretty good pat on the back from somebody, and like, I'm supporting you, and good job today. And so I think a patch is a good way to show support.
For sure. Yeah.
So
we definitely have like some straight identifying folks at our gym who have the patches too. So it's not something like that necessarily is identifying you. But yeah, hopefully you're comfortable with questions if you're wearing the patch either way. This is something that we as a community need to talk about more, both straight and LGBTQI people.
Yeah, and hopefully today has been a little bit of that. And you mentioned, if this is it's a fairly young community that you've started here on Facebook, and of course it would be nice to have maybe a corporate sponsor or somebody to help you get the ball rolling on this. So if you're somebody who's in the marketing department, or you have some kind of a gi company or a supplement thing or something like that, I don't know. Go to their Facebook page, send them a message, and say, hey, we would like to support you, and this is a area of our community that could use some support. I mean, it's like sometimes support is just the pat on the back and just saying, hey, we support these people, and put that, I went by on the BJJ Brick Facebook page, and I put that I liked it from there. So, if you go look through the likes, that's going to pop up as one, and that's just a little bit of support, so, and gi patches are great. And if somebody wants to sponsor you guys and give you a little bit of funds to help get gi patches out to people, that would be an amazing thing to do, and just a way to kind of step up.
Yeah, for sure. And Byron, I have to thank you for giving us this platform to talk with. It's really awesome that you let us reach out and then reach back. We're super grateful to have been able to talk to you. Yeah,
we have this platform here where we talk about jiu-jitsu most of the time, and occasionally different things pop up, and we talk about subcategories of jiu-jitsu, and I feel like we had a good discussion today, and then of course you shared some great coaching advice, and I appreciate that. I know everybody does, and we just kind of got the conversation started more or less. I don't think we really had this is the conversation and it's over. It's more like this is where it goes, and this is where it is today. But it's nice to help get the ball rolling on this one.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that most of the people that I've interacted with in the jiu-jitsu community have been nothing but amazingly supportive for LGBTQI people, or at least well-intentioned. Yeah, like you said, I think this is just sort of the beginning of things, and hopefully things will just keep going awesomely.
That's what I'm trying to do with everything in my life, is keep it going awesomely.
Yeah.
So the best way to get a hold of you, is it to go to the Facebook page and send a message, or is there somebody could actually talk with you and get to know you better?
A few of the founders and I regularly are the people who are posting on Rollout, so you should be able to just see like my Mark Fisher Facebook account right there, having posted in Rollout, and you can just private message me even if you want, and reach me that way. Well,
cool. And I'll put links to your page on the show notes, and definitely swing by and like the page and send them some support and help this community grow, and it'll also help your local community grow, and it's like, I think imagine if you're a woman and you walk into the gym and there's one other girl training. It's a lot easier to train and to jiu-jitsu. But if you're the first girl it's a tougher road. But
For sure.
if maybe there's, it's like not knowing the sex of your training partners. That's really confusing and hard for people to build a community. So, I think we're at that, it's 2015, it's time to build this part of our community and to let it grow and to show support. And Jiu-Jitsu is so much more about rolling around and choking people and doing arm bars. We're becoming friends. We're learning. The big thing that I've learned how to learn. I've learned about, how I move and about, developing skill and that sort of thing. And that to me has been something that I've learned from Jiu-Jitsu, and it's not necessarily Jiu-Jitsu related, but it's been a big part of my development as a person.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Right, it's what got me through grad school. Right, so I was a grad student in sciences, so in genetics, and an experiment wouldn't work, and you would have no idea why, and it would be the most frustrating thing, and you'd have to try all these other things, like is it this or is it that, right? And your whole experiment would last months and months and months. Like I spent an entire summer once troubleshooting just like this one little protocol that I couldn't get to work, right? And Jiu-Jitsu, what it does, for me at least, is it just shrinks that all into like a little microcosm of problems that happen that you can solve on a much shorter time scale. Like, I didn't get that arm bar because his arm slipped out or because he did a hitchhiker escape. What can I do to tighten that up? How can I prevent that from happening again, right? And these are these little problems that you can solve on a much faster time scale, usually, than in your real life. But it's exactly what you say. It teaches you how to learn these things, right? How to deal with failure and then carry on from that.
Well, cool, and I agree totally with that. So, I appreciate you, Mark, for getting on here and sharing your story and part of this community that you're involved with and growing and develop that. And I thank you very much for the interview. Thank
you, Byron. It was my pleasure, I assure you.
All right, I want to thank Mark Fisher for the interview. I really appreciate him stepping up and helping to create this community online. And he's not the only member there, but he was happy to give the interview, to share what they have going on there. And like I said before, I urge you to go by their Facebook page and like it, as long as you don't have to be the perfect demographic in order to go by their page and like it. It's showing support for your teammates. It's showing that you're the type of person that they could talk to if they want to tell you more about themselves. So I hope that Jiu-Jitsu is a community that has opened its doors to the LGBTQI community, but I don't know. Maybe we're drastically lacking in numbers, and people like Mark could help bring this number back up to be like a % of the population of the city that you live in. So I think that would be a great thing. And Jiu-Jitsu has done so much for everybody's lives who train. Why would you want to exclude some people from training? That would be very unfortunate. I urge you, we've got tons of social media to connect with us. We got Facebook, Twitter, YouTubes, Instagrams, and I think there's a Pinterest thing going on. There's lots of stuff going on for wherever you're at social media wise. We've probably got something set up. We're not experts at social media by any means, but we do our best. We definitely appreciate the likes and shares we get, and it seems like the most important likes and shares we get are not online, but there's people telling their training partners about the podcast, and it could be after your roll, or just mention it during the class to somebody that you heard a good interview, or you got some good ideas from the podcast. We really appreciate that, sending fellow teammates to the podcast. That means a lot to us. It really helps the show grow, and we appreciate that support. We've got the next 2 episodes planned out already, and we're just going to start a little series on traveling, or BJJ Globetrotting. We've had an interview with Christian Graugarth, the BJJ Globetrotter, a little while back, and so that will be, I guess, part 1 of our series, and then we're going to do another part with Scott Baylor. He's traveling in the United States and Canada in a van, going from jiu-jitsu gym to jiu-jitsu gym, learning tons of jiu-jitsu. And then we're going to also, after that'll be episode 113, and 114 will be Jennifer Perez. She's been to many different countries and trained in many different gyms, and she's going to share her story and her experiences. So a lot of great travel advice and doing jiu-jitsu while you're on the road advice coming your way the next 2 episodes. Great stories, great people, and really a lot of talk about the community. And it's a good way to get your pulse on what's happening around the country or around the world in jiu-jitsu, because these people are getting to see different gyms. And I think you'd be surprised at how similar a lot of gyms are, and maybe some gyms you'd be surprised at how different it could be. So we get a nice perspective of that in the next 2 episodes. Like I mentioned before, I'm in me and Gary train in Wichita, Kansas. If you're coming through the area or you're here and you want to train with us, send us an email, bjjbrick@gmail.com, or hit us up on our Facebook page, just on a message there. That's an easy way as well. We'd be happy to train with you. Always looking to train with more people, and definitely nice to meet listeners any chance we get. Hopefully we'll get the show back on the road to normal with Gary next week, and really looking forward to that, because I don't know if you can tell, but it's a little harder doing this thing solo. It's like I'm talking to myself the whole time and hoping somebody's listening out there. I know you guys are, and I really appreciate that. So as always, stay sweaty, my friends.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.